Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. I am super excited today because I get to introduce to you my next two stamp sets. So this is Blooming View. This is going to be the set that we are using today, along with lots of other stuff. But this window, you guys, this window die, oh, it's amazing. I totally love it. So it basically cuts out the outside and the inside. This is the other one that I don't want to call it the other one like it's less than. It's just not the one we're using today. But it has these little florals and books. You guys know that I'm a book lover, and this pretty little bird cage, and it's all very vintage style, and it all, has coordinating dies. In addition to that, I am using this. This is the next, they've been doing these for quite a while, and I really like them. The little layouts. And we're going to be using some other stuff as well, but I didn't know what I was going to be doing for the backgrounds, so I didn't show it to you now. I'll show it to you later. But anywho, this is part of a YouTube hop for the Vintage Love release for Honeybee Stamps, and they're doing giveaways. So make sure, if you are not subscribed yet, that you subscribe and you comment, and then continue on to the next hop. There's two $50 gift certificates. They will pull the winners, I believe, on February 5th, and then they'll announce it over on their blog. But yeah, so it's super easy. You just hop along for really great content, and then you have a chance to win a gift certificate. It's great. So what I'm doing is I'm using the Honeybee Intense Black ink. This is safe for alcohol markers. We are going to be doing Copa coloring today, and I stamp each of these twice. So I stamped all three of the rose clusters that's included in Blooming View, as well as the window. The window is so, I really truly love it. What I had said before, like with the die before, so it cuts the outside, but it will also cut out the inside so you can use it as a frame. We're going to use it both ways today. We're actually doing 3 cards. Just to, well, you guys know, if you've watched any of my previous videos that show like my stamp sets when they're kind of being released, I typically tend to do more than 1 card. I have a lot of ideas because I've drawn it quite some time ago. So that was my color palette. I just kind of messed around with some ideas that I had for colors. This is not a go-to color palette for me, but it is something that I really like. I loved the purplish magenta color with the emerald green, and then adding in some peach. That has to do with a conversation that I had with my girlfriend Dawn. We'll get to that hopefully at some point in this little story time, but let's talk about the coloring. So these roses there's a lot of detail in a small area. And so sometimes those can be a little bit overwhelming to tackle. So I'm going to give you some tips that help me quite a bit with getting dimension in these smaller areas. So first of all, I filled the whole thing in. I like to do what I call color mapping when I'm working with an image that has a lot going on in it. So I filled in the whole thing with my lightest color. Now I'm going in with my darkest color, and I am not outlining everything in the darkest color. I know when we talk about coloring, we talk about how shadows will be there'll be the places where 2 points meet, and there'll be places where one overlaps the other. Sometimes we have to make exceptions for that kind of general rule because we don't have a lot of real estate. And so I chose to start with this particular flower because it is open, it is front facing, and there are lots of petals and layers. What I'm doing is, and you're going to see this repeated, we're going to color so many roses. What I did was, with the darkest color, I just went in and I looked for any of the little divots. So just any point where the line dipped down, that's going to be the darkest part. And then I just put a dot of color. Then when I moved on to my next color, that is when I added the full line, and that's it. We're not feathering, we're just adding a full line. We're using only the tip of the marker. We're not putting any pressure down, just the tip of the marker and just doing a line. We're going to go over that line with our next mid-tone, which for me is an RV66. And then lastly, we're going to come in with our lightest color and go over those edges again. And you can see how much dimension that we get. We're going to color one of these smaller buds here. So again, when there's a lot going on and we're not really familiar with an image, we're going to fill in the whole thing to kind of map it and see what should be colored. I colored these flowers so many times. So eventually, like, I was super familiar with them. Obviously, I drew them. That makes me a little bit more familiar with them to begin with. But I didn't have to continue to do this. But this is something, especially if you're a beginner colorist or if you're really unfamiliar with an image, like the first time that you're coloring it, that's totally acceptable to do. So then I went back in with that darker color. I did those dots. Here's where we're going in, and we're putting in our first full line. Again, only using the tip of the marker because we want to leave plenty of lighter area. The shadows and the highlights are what help give us dimension in our coloring. For the next midtone, because this is a little bit smaller, I pretty much filled in everything except for the parts where the petals are bent up. For those where they're kind of like bending over on themselves, I'm going to use the lightest color, and then I'm also just going to hit the high points. I also, like I said, chose to do this peach color. How did I come about this? I was having a conversation with my crafty BFF, Dawn. Peach is the Pantone color of the year. And she was like, I'm so excited. I love peach. Peach goes with anything. Peach is like a neutral. And I was like, peach is not a neutral. What? And she was like, oh yeah, peach goes with navy, and peach goes with purple, and peach goes with red. And I was like, peach goes with a red. Girl, what? So, anywho, I think it's important to learn and to grow. And so, since I mean, not that I don't like peach, I do. I think it's very pretty, but I decided that I would try to incorporate it into this kind of color scheme with this like magenta and this emerald, and I don't regret it. I think it's super. I do think it's super pretty. This particular peach combination is more on the orange side versus the maybe like the pinkish coral side, and so because purple and yellow are opposites on the color wheel, going more towards the like the yellowish orange and the rose more towards like the pinkish side, it does complement each other nicely. The reason that I chose to go that way is so that I could make them two-tone, which you probably noticed from the title of the video. Why would I want to make them two-tone? Because it makes them more interesting. It also gives us an opportunity, whereas like with the first one, how, you have all the different leaves and it looks like it's climbing, which is the purpose. It's intended to kind of climb up the window. But you would have all one color. I don't really like doing all one color. I mean, you can. It is very pretty, but I like a lot of variation. And so I wanted to be able to do them different colors and still have them work together. So I chose peaches that were closer to the orange side and purples that were closer to the pink side so that I could make them make friends. And here is how we are going to do that. This flower right here is going to be a regular peach flower, just like the last one that we colored. But the next one is going to be a two-tone. And what I mean by that is it's going to have two different color families in it. So my darkest color is what I'm going to start with, which is this magenta purpley color we have going on here. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to do the same thing that we've been doing. I missed a section of that flower. I had to go back and get it. But I'm going to do the same thing that we've been doing. So I'm looking for the little dips in the petals so that I can add my darkest colors. And I know it looks like it's lines, but it's actually just little dots. I'm not doing any feathering. I'm not pulling any lines out. I'm just doing little dots along the darkest part. You can see how white this flower still is. Then I'm going to go in with that VO5, and here's where we're going to actually start putting down our lines again, going right over those dots, using those lines to create that definition where the darkest part of the petal is going to be. And then I did use all of my purples. You don't have to. You could skip maybe the VO5 and just go to the RV66, but you still want to leave a white area when you're going in with your RV55. This is the more difficult way to do it, but it is the most contrasting. So I'm taking that RV55, and you can see there's still some white. And then I'm going to take my lightest peach color, which is a YR00, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to go over that white space, but I'm also going to go over that RV55. And because they will work together, since they're an orange and a pink, the second way you can do it, which is what you see me doing here, because my YR00 is much lighter, it will bleach out the RV55. That's why they blend so well. So you can actually go back into a flower that you've previously colored with our pinkish purple combination and go over just the edges, and it will give it a peach kind of tinge, like a tint to it. Here, I'm going to show you them right next to each other. So I'm going to color them at the same time, just for time-saving purposes. But I'm doing the same thing, looking for those divots, putting down those dots, and leaving lots and lots of white space because we have a lot of colors to fit into this flower in order to create that dimension. But this one I'm working on now will actually be the one that has just the kind of peach glazed over the top, and the one that's front facing will have the really contrasting peach, where we've left some white area for the peach to really show through. Now, we've talked before in other videos about how to pick colors that will work together. And I've told you in the past, which is still true, that if you look at the last number, that's typically going to tell you if they'll work together. So if one is a 4 and one is a 5, you typically can make them work together. If one is a 4 and one is a 6, you can make them work together. One is a 5 and one is a 3, you can usually make them work together. What we're doing here is another exception to the rule, which is why I encourage you to play with your colors and see what will and will not work. So my lightest pinkish purple here is an RV55. It ends in 5. My peach color is a YR00. That 0 is not close to that 5. So why does this work? This works because a 0 has very little pigment, which means it has much more alcohol blending solution so that the pigment is more dilute, and it will bleach the previous color. Not completely, it's not a colorless blender, but it will bleach it out quite a bit, which allows us to deposit that peach color over top of the pink. Now, will all color combinations work this well together? No. So if you try to bleach a blue with an orange, like, there's still opposites on the color wheel. So you do have to be a little bit selective about your family. However, you can see here in putting in the peach how it bleaches out that RV55, leaving just a little bit of the pink left, depositing the peach on both of these. So the one in the front is going to be a little bit more of a stark contrast, which is honestly the one I prefer, but the one in the back is just a little bit, it just has a little bit of peach. So now that we have the flowers colored, let's get into the leaves. Typically, I like very bright colors. These colors that I've picked are a little bit more muted. Consequently, I had to adjust my greens to be a bit more muted. So I'm going in with my darkest color. Rose leaves are a bit jagged, so that is how they're drawn. In order to kind of play up that texture and set them apart from the smaller leaves that are in the background, I am adding these lines. Again, we're back to the lines. So for this, I am just following the shape of the leaf. You want to go with the shape of the leaf. But I'm just flicking in little lines from the side. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be perfectly spaced. Sometimes they might overlap. It's okay. But basically, I'm just flicking it in from the sides, and that's going to help give this more jagged texture. Once I move on to my mid-tone, I'm going to go right over those lines that I already put down, and you'll see that I'm filling in a little bit of that white space. I still have a pretty distinct white line in between each of those little lines that we're putting down. I'm also putting a line down the center, which I am going over that as well. My lightest color, which is definitely more muted than the first two, but because it's going to go on top of everything, it really does knock back the color quite a bit. I'm also going to take this over top of everything in my stem so that it blends really nicely and it's all muted. But again, I'm going to go in, and even though I am not leaving any white space behind, I'm filling in everything. You'll see when I'm putting the color down, I'm putting the color down in the same direction, because when you're coloring something, it's very important to follow the lines that are given, because otherwise your coloring is going to look off. So if I tried to color these like side to side, you would, some areas you can still see those strokes even though we're using alcohol markers, and it would look off. So that's why I'm just following whatever the shape of the leaf is. Same thing with my petals. Whatever you're coloring, follow its shape. So for the ones in the background, I wanted them to be the same but different. I wanted them to be kind of pushed into the background. And so I chose to do a blue-green base. I'm using a 78 and a 75. So they're pretty dark and they're pretty desaturated. And then I'm going to go right over top of these with my lightest green color, so that they're all kind of in the same family. But because those other ones are a bit darker and my color base was already desaturated, they'll be pushed into the back. So these are all the flowers colored. I colored both of the ones that I stamped the same. And then we're going to get into the window. Funny story about how this like came about, which I really love sharing that part of the creative process with you guys. I have to sit on it for a while, you know, until the stamp sets come out. But I think it's very interesting, and I was always very interested when other, like before I started illustrating, when other illustrators would share how they came up with the ideas. So the intention was to do, like, obviously it's vintage love. The feel of it, the vibe of it is very vintage. But I was having a really, really hard time with the roses. I wasn't really confident in my ability to put them together. I was just really, really struggling. And so sometimes when I'm struggling, what I do is I will draw kind of like the vessel of them first. So in my previous sets, with the lantern, the Christmas lantern, I did the lantern first before I did any of the greenery. For the Grateful Gatherings, which is the pumpkin set, which has the wagon wheel, I did the wagon wheel first before I did anything else. So sometimes if I have a hard time getting started, I actually just start with the structural component and not the florals, even though most of my sets are floral sets. So for this, because I was having such a hard time with the flowers and I was not feeling very confident in my abilities, I actually started with the other pieces. So I started with some books, with some suitcases, with some hat boxes, with this window. And then I worked my way into the florals. And kind of what ended up happening after I had drawn the florals and I had put everything together, and then kind of, you know, presented it to Honeybee and like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What are you guys thinking? All of us loved the window so much, but it was smaller. You know, it was on a smaller scale, that we decided that we were just going to actually build the whole set around this window. No regrets. I love the window. I love the way that it came out. I think it's a super versatile image. You can do so many different things with it. And especially with the way that they chose to do the die, where we can, you know, cut it out as one piece or cut it out as more of like a framework. Really just lends itself to so many different techniques. And I love that because I'm all about the versatility. You guys know that. So, I colored this up more of like a gold color scheme. And then this is, I wanted to do like the sky reflecting off the window. And so that's what I'm doing here. Truly, if you're going to do this, you should do the sky first and then color the frame. I kept trying to avoid picking up any like golden yellows and bringing them into my sky, because I did it first, and that was my own fault. And I think it's just because I was excited to just finally be able to color the window. So, colored the window, put down my darkest color, which isn't dark at all. It's a BG11, and then blended that out with a BG10. And now I'm going back in and going over everything with a B quadruple 0. And this is really just going to help it kind of blend out into that white and look more reflective. So I colored up another one of the frames the same way, but without the sky, because my intention is to cut those panels out. Once I had everything done and together and I was looking at it, I realized that the peach was maybe a little bit bright. So I knocked it back with an R30, which is just slightly more desaturated. Now let's get into the die cutting. Originally, I picked this plum colored cardstock. This is actually by Spellbinders, and I was going to use it is one of my background pieces. I also have some vellum here. The vellum I did end up using. The plum cardstock from Spellbinders I did not end up using. So this, by the way, these pieces are from the Lace Heart layering frames. That's their kind of layout set. So for the window, because I had 2 to cut out, I did one with the inside and one with the outside. But you'll see later on, you can actually cut them together. You don't have to use them as separate pieces. So once I had the florals cut out, before I moved on to anything else, I laid them on the desk, and I realized pretty quickly that I didn't love it with the plum from Spellbinders. So I picked the plum from Hero Arts, which is much pinker. And then here's where I decided what my background treatments were going to be. So I chose to do the 3D embossing folder. This is the floral heart. Love this. Such good detail. So many techniques I can see to do with this in the future. And then I chose the Damask stencil for the middle one. And then the last one has the Vintage Flora stamp, which again is just a really great base. If you love kind of that vintagey vibe or that collagey vibe, you're going to be able to do so much with that. So this is, the 3D embossing folder done. Now we're moving on to the stenciling. I wanted the stenciling to look like wallpaper. So I just wanted to do a tone on tone. Truly, I did contemplate doing a gold. And then later on, we're going to incorporate gold because I cannot help myself. But this is just a really great stencil. So what I'm doing is I'm just using some clear embossing ink and a pouncer to pounce that on. You can see automatically it's getting so much darker. And this is just going to create tone on tone. If you don't have a clear embossing ink, you can absolutely use a dark green ink to get the same effect, but I didn't see the need to have to clean up an ink color if I didn't have to. So now this is done, and I can just set it aside to dry. I'm going to use the same clear embossing ink with this Vintage Flora. Now this plum cardstock has been cut out with the largest layer, the most outside layer from that Lace Heart frame, and then I'm just going to do tone on tone again. Because I'm not trying to take away from the flowers. I want the flowers and the window to be the focal point. But I do need something else to make it so it's not so plain. So I inked this up, and then I used my little pressure tool to make sure I was getting good pressure in my MISTI. And then, of course, I CPR'd it because old habits die hard. And then it was done. So you could see, just adds a little bit of texture. So at this point, I kind of had all my layouts done, but I wasn't really loving the vellum heart. So I chose to cut it again out of gold cardstock. This is Concord 9th matte gold. I'm running low on it. As you can see, I have to use some spare pieces that were left over. I need to buy some more. But then this other one that I cut out of the vellum, I'm actually going to go in, and it does like a little stitched detail. So I'm just following along that stitched detail to cut off the scallop, and then that will give me the perfect size heart to layer inside of it. So the gold isn't like in your face, it's more of an accent. And I was super happy with the way that came out. However, it created the problem of then I wanted all of them to have gold. So I had to go back. I had to go back and rethink my design. So here I tried the one with the 3. I couldn't see quite enough of the heart, so then I went back and did the one with the 2, and I liked that much better. I will tell you, I love the window. The window is fantastic, but you can absolutely use these flowers without the window. You don't need the window to utilize them. So this is where I'm going to cut it together. This is that same matte gold cardstock. I'm going to tape the outside frame in place. Then I will line up the inside and tape that in place. I'm going to use the positive and the negative here. This is going to serve 2 purposes. So I'm going to use the actual frame that it cuts out of gold to go over the sky one that we colored. And then I'm going to use this leftover piece as my layer for the one with the white. So I told you my intention was to have the damask stencil as the wallpaper, but it was just I was like, something needs to go behind this window, something needs to happen here. And I was actually chatting with Dawn, and she was like, maybe try putting something on the outside. And she was 100% correct. Don't you love when you can rely on your crafty friends to help you move you in the right direction when you're feeling indecisive? Which is very comical because normally I'm very decisive and she is very indecisive. But anywho, it was the right call. For the sentiments, I did them all, since I stamped in black, I did them all white heat embossing on black cardstock, and then just stamped them with the Brilliant White pigment ink from Honeybee, and then heat set them in white. So yeah, so we built this whole set around this window, which I love. And then I still got to I'm such a huge book nerd. I love books. I love reading. I always have. So I got to do these really romantic books in the little bird cage with the florals. And so I'm very excited to use that one as well. So now we've pretty much done all of our elements and we just need to get to the building of these cards. I think they're all they're enough to be matchy-matchy. You know how I am. I have to have them match. But they aren't so matchy-matchy that they don't look different from one another. And doing the cards and putting them together, and especially before I added the florals and just seeing the window, really just confirmed to me that for sure I will be using this window for other things than just these florals. I won't be able to help myself. So the gold heart went directly into the center of that 3D embossing heart. So I went ahead and put that down, and then I'm just going to put a little bit of glue in the center. Since the vellum you obviously will be able to see through, and once you put adhesive on the back of it, it's pretty apparent. You'll see it here. You can see that big glue dot. But my flower is going to cover it, so I'm not worried about it. And then I will put that in the center. I will add my little sentiment down at the bottom, and then we'll move on to the next one. So, yeah, I'm doing my voiceover. I'm always late. You guys know that. But I messed up the dates for the YouTube app. I thought it was supposed to be today instead of, I thought it was supposed to be yesterday instead of today. And so, which was a good thing because I thought I was going to have to pull an all-nighter, but it ended up not being that way. Here, this is that gold frame that we cut, and so you can use the die portion of it without using the stamp portion of it, and it still looks super cool. Look how cute, how cool that looks. And it's got that metallic finish that I totally love, so it catches the light. Because it all has to be matchy-matchy. But this window I did pop up, and then I kind of let my flowers hang off the edge of the card as well as overlap the window just a little bit. So this whole time that I've been doing this, that's why I started telling you about the why I was late. Well, I'm not late, but I thought that I, didn't have as much time as I did. But anyway, is because now I'm doing my voiceover and it is late into the morning, and everybody else is sleeping. And when that happens, just like with nap time, like if I happen to be working on a Saturday or Sunday and my wee little jelly bean is napping, I bring in the monitor and I turn the volume down so then I can just sit here and watch her to make sure that she doesn't get up or she doesn't need anything or whatever while I'm, doing my voiceover, since I can't leave the volume up or you would be able to hear every cough and, creak and all that. But lately our monitor hasn't been holding a charge real well. So I left it on the charger right up until the last minute and then brought it upstairs. And the whole time I have just been just praying and hoping and wishing that she does not wake up and that this alert that it's like the battery is dying doesn't start going off in the middle of my voiceover. I started with 4 bars. I'm down to 2 already. So let's hope that we make it just the next couple of minutes before it goes kaput. That would be amazing. If you are a parent, you know what I am saying. I'm sure you have been in well, probably not the voiceover situation unless you make YouTube videos, but like where you're just sitting there praying, hoping, wishing that they don't wake up at the most inconvenient time for you. So for this one, the layout is not perfect. Okay, I don't want you to think that I matched my windows up perfectly when I die cut them. I didn't, but it is close. And that close is going to be good enough because I'm going to fit the frame right inside the little cutout. So the little bit of gold that's peeking in, I think it's like the top left, isn't going to really be a big deal because it's going to be covered by that frame. If I wanted it to be exactly perfectly lined up, I would have kept that white piece, which is what, I cut the stamped versions out of. I would have kept that white piece, laid my dies inside of it, and then ran it all through, so that it would be perfectly lined up, but it was close enough for government work. So here, I felt like everything was a little bit bottom heavy. So I chose to add this little 2 rows cluster up at the kind of the top left, and that balanced it out really nicely. For the previous one, we popped up the window and popped up the florals. For this one, I adhered the window down flat. I mean, it's a couple of layers of cardstock, but then I chose to just pop up the florals over top of the window. So each one of these cards has just a little bit of dimension. And like you can see, it's very hard to see in the photos, but you can see it here on camera, like how it like peeks into the window. So it looks like this is the outside of the window, like maybe a white house or white, shutters or whatever. And the flowers are growing around the window. And then you can see just that little peek of that damask stencil, like kind of wallpaper look on the inside. Honestly, I cannot choose which one is my favorite, but it is a close tie between this one with the green background, which wouldn't that just make my mother weep? Like I had this color, I had that color carpet in my room, and my room was actually done in a rose theme when I was younger. Like when I was became a young woman and they let me redo it. I picked hunter green carpet, and then I had a pink rose bedspread. But anywho, I added my gemstones, and then that's it. That's both cards. So thank you guys so much for joining me. We're down to the last bar on the monitor, so I think we made it. Please hop along for the video hop. Don't forget to comment and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for your time. I always appreciate it, and I hope you'll head over and check out the new release. Bye.